Okay, we've had a lot of people in the comment section wanting an updated Dynasty set of rookie rankings because, of course, I mean, we have someone like George Pickens surging, Damien Pierce, Romeo Dubose getting hype, Isaiah Pacheco as well. Now, I can't guarantee Isaiah Pacheco is going to be in the top 24, but before we get into it, guys, if you have not done so already, go down there, drop a like on this video, subscribe to the channel only if you play Dynasty Fantasy Football, because that's all you're going to find on this channel will be Dynasty. But I think that should be about it. Let's not waste any of your time. I don't even want to spend much time on these top guys because we've talked about them for so long now. I mean, Breece Hall up here, tier 1 by himself. What the hell am I supposed to tell you that we have not already said? I mean, the day we had the NFL Combine and we looked at the size, the athleticism, and we were able to cross-reference that with his collegiate production. I came out that day when he had a DLF ADP of like running back 20, and I said, okay, Breece Hall is the top 5 running back in Dynasty. Go overpay him for him right now. And since then, I think people have come to the consensus that Breece Hall is a borderline top 5 running back in Dynasty. Hell, he checks every single box. He's a very, very, very good prospect. I don't want to say he's the same level prospect as a Jonathan Taylor, but I don't know what we could see from the guy other than maybe being in a better offense. Now let's go down to our second tier. We got Drake London at 2. I mean, with Drake London, yes, deals with a knee injury week 1 of the preseason. Hopefully he's able to overcome that. Hopefully he's able to be good to go by week 1. Of course, it's Dynasty. Who the hell gives a damn about his knee injury in the preseason? This is another one of these wide receivers. He was our wide receiver 1 going into the NFL draft. He checked every single box. Broke out at 18 years old, had a very large role in an offense that had Michael Pittman as a senior and had Amon-Ra St. Brown a year older than him as well. Then he goes on to dominate on a per game basis his final season there. I know a lot of people have question marks surrounding his speed, the athleticism you have with this profile, but as I've talked about time and time again, and as I've proven with historical research in our Dynasty Rookie Draft Guide, running backs, definitely their athletic profiles matter. Wide receiver? No. What we need to be looking at is we need to be looking at their production. Now, going over to our third player, someone that has lost a considerable amount of value. I'm standing by it, though. We're going to have Treylon Burks. Now, I did have Treylon Burks going into the NFL draft as our wide receiver 3 behind Garrett Wilson, but it just comes down to the fact that, I mean, here, I'm not a Zach Wilson believer, so I am willing to move Treylon Burks up to 3, where Treylon Burks can very easily, I mean, probably will be the wide receiver 1 in his offense this upcoming year. I expect this to be a better offense than the New York Jets with more efficient quarterback play. They were in the same tier for us going into the NFL draft, so I feel like it's not too unreasonable for us to go through and move Treylon Burks ahead of Wilson after the draft. And of course, we are going to have to continue to monitor the reports because you haven't had some great training camp reports for Treylon Burks, but I'm going to be willing to ignore the Treylon Burks training camp because we have a 3-year collegiate resume to look at where he looks like an elite level receiver. Now, going over to our wide receiver 4, Garrett Wilson checks every single box. I mean, dominated in an offense that had Chris Olave, the number 11 pick in this year's NFL draft, Jameson Williams, the number 12 pick in this year's NFL draft, and Jackson Smith-Njigba, the wide receiver 1 in next year's class. Garrett Wilson truly is a special player. I'm not a fan of Zach Wilson. I'm unsure if Zach Wilson ever turns it around based on historical comparisons with his adjusted yards per pass attempt as a rookie, but still, I mean, bet on talent. It's Dynasty. Then our 5th player, last guy in this tier, is going to be Kenneth Walker. I know a lot of people are going to prefer pushing the running back up over these wide receivers. I mean, maybe in a redraft format, sure, but the thing is, hell, I don't care too much about positional scarcity in Dynasty. When we're looking at these career arcs, we're looking at long-term value with these guys. I'll say long-term, Walker will probably be in a better situation, hopefully with multiple first-round picks going forward, multiple second-round picks going forward. This team's able to do something to address the offensive line. As it stands, the offensive line's very bad, but Rashad Penny's not under contract next season. Now let's drop it down to tier 3 here. Let's start it off Chris Olave at wide receiver 6. With Olave, he definitely takes a large hit his senior season, of course. And with Olave, it looks like he'll be the wide receiver 2 in New Orleans as Michael Thomas back at practice. Michael Thomas looks like he's good to go. You also have Jarvis Landry, I don't want to overreact to Jarvis Landry being there in New Orleans because, of course, I mean, hell, it's freaking Jarvis Landry versus Chris Olave, a wide receiver that was dominant in that same situation we were discussing with Garrett Wilson, where Olave was one of those reasons that our next wide receiver in Jameson Williams had to transfer. And with Jameson Williams, I felt like I was out here, the lone guy saying, do not overvalue him in the offseason, screaming when people were taking Jameson Williams before Garrett Wilson, when they were taking him before Drake London, when they were taking him before Chris Olave. I agree, he is a wide receiver with a lot of upside, but he does not have the same complete profile that those other guys have. It took him until his junior season to break out, and when he did break out, he did not have the same level of production that we saw from those other guys from a market share perspective. And that's what actually translates to fantasy production at the next level. I think you'll be a fantastic receiver for the Detroit Lions, and that you can go out there and you can see him stretch NFL defenses, draw defensive attention away from Swift, Amon-Ra St. Brown, TJ Hawkinson, and allow this to be a more efficient offense overall without even having to command a lot of targets. Now let's go over to our next player. At 8, we are going to have Kenny Pickett. I mean, with Pickett, looked great week 1 of the preseason. This is a quarterback that, more importantly, did get the first round draft capital and is stepping into a very good situation. I mean, hell, here he's going to have Deontay Johnson. He's going to have Chase Claypool. He's going to have a coaching staff that time and time again is able to make it work, whether that's with Mason Rudolph or Ben Roethlisberger. And also, he's going to have our next player on this list, the last guy in this tier. We have moved George Pickens up to 9. Now, with Pickens, I went from being seemingly lower than everybody on him else before the NFL draft when you had people steaming him up over Chris Olave. And based on a tweet that I sent out a couple days ago, maybe I am going to be lower once again. But I found myself after the NFL draft, people were all off of him. We were able to scoop him up a ton at pick 11, pick 12. Now with Pickens, I don't want to overreact due to training camp. But what I will say is, we've always acknowledged the fact that this is a wide receiver that will have a very polarizing outcome. This is a wide receiver that had that incomplete profile where, hell, it was very hard to say that he had a high floor. But at the same time, he did show elite level traits by breaking out at 18 years old at Georgia, declaring early for the NFL draft, still managing to get that NFL draft capital. So you could see George Pickens eventually being the wide receiver 1 in this draft class. 100%. That's in the cards. That is in the range of outcomes. Now, would I rank him there? Hell no. I'm not going to do that. No, I can't do that. Deontay Johnson is still going to be the wide receiver 1 in Pittsburgh. I will have George Pickens at 9. If you wanted to take him over Jameson Williams, if you wanted to take him over Chris Olave, I wouldn't do it. You do you. Just please, for the love of God, don't start drafting him over Garrett Wilson, Treylon Burks, and Drake London, guys that check every single box. Now, let's drop it down to our next tier. Our 10th player is going to be Sky Moore. Now, here with Sky Moore, this is a wide receiver that if you check out his ADP on Underdog for those redraft leagues, people are over the moon with Sky Moore. Obviously, getting great training camp reports and at the same time going into an elite level offense. But from a redraft perspective, people are taking Sky Moore before Garrett Wilson, before Treylon Burks, before Jameson Williams, before George Pickens, before Chris Olave. And obviously, we need to keep that in mind. If the people over there on Underdog are right, and Sky Moore is the second most productive receiver in this year's class, year 1, even if we don't think he's the second best talent, hell, his ADP is going to go skyrocketing. He easily has to be at the top of this tier. And we do need to be on the lookout for that Mecole Hardman injury. I'm recording this August 17th. Right now, Mecole Hardman's being evaluated with a groin injury. If Mecole Hardman is set to miss the majority portion of this season, Sky Moore probably jumps up into that next tier because, hell, just the opportunity is going to be there in Kansas City. But real quick, if you wanted to go draft Sky Moore as the wide receiver 2 in this class like people are doing on Underdog, make sure you go sign up for Underdog Fantasy. You can find the link in the description. You can find it in the live chat. Find it in the comment section. It's everywhere. And when you sign up for Underdog and use promo code FLOCK, you'll get our 2022 fantasy football rankings. You'll get our Dynasty rankings. You'll get our 2022 fantasy football draft guide with legitimately just a $10 deposit. Plus, you can draft with us in the live stream every single night. So go sign up for Underdog. Go have some fun. And let's move on to our 11th player here in Christian Watson. With Christian Watson, I have found myself drafting a crap ton of him. Yeah, he does have red flags. He declared for the NFL draft late. He's a much older wide receiver prospect than you would like to see. 100%. I'm willing to admit that. But at the same time, with Christian Watson, we can say this is a receiver that has it in the range of outcomes to go out there, be the wide receiver one in Green Bay. He's an elite size adjusted athlete. And on top of this, he had over a 40% market share as a final mark there in school. It was a very small school. Yes, he was 22, 23 years old. So I don't think we could come out here and say he's the same level of prospect as what we have with guys at the very top, even if he will be playing in one of the most efficient offenses. Now, our next tier is going to be led off with Johan Dotson at 12. So with Johan Dotson here, this is a wide receiver that I think does check a lot of boxes. He did not break out early, which at the wide receiver position is going to be a red flag, but he does have an excuse for it. I mean, at Penn State, he had to deal with KJ Hamler. He had to deal with Pat Frymuth through his first 2 years there. And y'all know I am a KJ Hamler stan. So I think that is a good enough excuse for Johan Dotson, where we did see the complete dominance his final 2 seasons there at Penn State. I mean, he does go to a team that has a solidified wide receiver one in Terry McLaurin. And I can't believe I'm coming out as like the Carson Wentz stan, the Carson Wentz fanboy in the fantasy football community right now. But I have been defending Wentz, I guess, some. Or I do think Carson Wentz is going to be the best quarterback that Washington has seen in quite some time. I think he's significantly better than Taylor Heineke. And I do think that this overall passing offense in Washington will be better than what we've seen in years past. Now, our 13th player off the board here is going to be James Cook. And with James Cook, it is just so hard for me where I'm willing to come out of my way and I'm willing to admit that he is in by far and away the best situation you could ask for. This is a running back that is going to be day one, the passing down running back for Josh Allen in this pass happy, productive Buffalo Bills offense. And at the same time, Devin Singletary's not under contract next offseason. So it's setting up to be about the best situation ever for Cook. So from a redraft perspective, honestly, I'm fine drafting James Cook. But from a dynasty perspective, would we want to be betting a little bit more on talent than situation? It is going to be difficult for me to push him above those wide receivers that I do just think are significantly better players. I do think they're significantly better prospects. Here with Cook, he doesn't even weigh 200 pounds. Unless you expect him to turn into Austin Eckler, which is an extreme outlier type scenario, it is very hard to imagine James Cook ever being anything more than a passing down running back. I'm kind of viewing him as a better version of J.D. McKissick, a better version of Nyheim Hines on the Buffalo Bills, which is still very viable. It's still a running back that can be a top 24 guy in fantasy. But now let's drop it down to our next tier, and I almost want to call this like tier 7. I almost want to skip tier 6 because I feel like it's such a far drop. We are going to be looking at Rashaad White, pick 14 here. I mean, with Rashaad White, he should get touches on a week-to-week basis. This is a running back that was, in my opinion, the best passing down running back in this year's entire NFL draft. He goes to a situation where there's a clear starting running back in front of him in Leonard Fournette. But at the end of the day, we know that this Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense has always tried to have that passing down running back, whether that's drafting Keyshawn Vaughn 2 years ago, signing Giovanni Bernard last year, now drafting Rashaad White. So I think White will see touches on a week-to-week basis. Maybe that will be able to have him maintain his dynasty value. And of course, you're mainly drafting him for the contingency value that if something were to occur to Leonard Fournette, he does have that upside. Now, our next player in this tier is going to be David Bell at 15. Now, with David Bell, this is a wide receiver currently going undrafted on Underdog, where literally, guys, everybody's drafted there. Everybody with the pulse is like, you have Laviska Shenault in some drafts going before David Bell in 2022 redraft formats. But I'm taking a step back. I'm calling David Bell this year's Amon-Ra St. Brown, where I think with David Bell, yes, this was a wide receiver that was ranked way too high before the NFL Combine. I mean, if y'all remember, this is someone that was ranked before Chris Olave for some dynasty players before the NFL Combine. Crazy. He drops because he's very slow. But that's what you were expecting with the slot wide receiver. That's why he fell in the NFL draft to round 3. Like the perfect example is Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jameson Williams in Detroit. Jameson Williams for the Detroit Lions is probably going to be a much more important wide receiver. He's probably going to be able to stretch NFL defenses with his speed, something that Amon-Ra St. Brown can't necessarily do. But from a fantasy football perspective, you probably want St. Brown because he's going to be the guy getting targets underneath. So I'm viewing this situation in Cleveland in a similar light, where I think maybe you have Donovan Peoples-Jones stretching the field. You have David Bell operating underneath. And right now, if you look at this wide receiver room, really the only guy with a guaranteed job in 2023 based on how these contracts are lined up is going to be David Bell. And I really do think that Deshaun Watson's playing the entire 2023 season. I don't know how many games he's playing this year, but he should be playing the entire 2023 year. Now, Wandel is going to be our next wide receiver. We are putting him at 16 with Wandel Robinson. Checks every single box. Broke out at 18 years old. Was dominant his final season at Kentucky. Has Debo Samuel type rushing. Of course, that's very hard to project to come into the NFL, but nonetheless, you like to see that he is a playmaker with the ball in his hands. And at the same time with Wandel Robinson, he declares early for the NFL draft. I mean, the only red flag that you were going to have is the size. So many people got burned with Rondale Moore last year. Hell, I was fine drafting Rondale Moore last year. I was willing to overlook the size. So people are not wanting to do the same thing with Wandale. But just because Rondale failed, I don't necessarily think that means Wandale is going to. Now, our last player in this tier, Jaylen Tolbert, one of the biggest risers that we are going to have, as it now looks like you're not only going to have no Amari Cooper in Dallas, not only are you not going to have Cedric Wilson, not only is Michael Gallup going to be down for the beginning of the year, but now James Washington's hurt as well. So it looks like Jaylen Tolbert is locked in for the time being as the wide receiver 2 in Dallas. And when Michael Gallup comes back, Tolbert's still probably going to be playing on 3 wide receiver sets. So people are so excited about Tolbert. I'm not telling you to do this. I'm just pointing it out for you so you can see the hype that Tolbert has for 2022. If you go over to Underdog and look in those redraft leagues, those high stakes redraft players are drafting Jaylen Tolbert over Garrett Wilson. They are drafting a 4th-year rookie out of South Alabama that went in the 3rd round of the NFL draft over Garrett Wilson. But that is the type of situation that he finds himself in this upcoming season. It's going to be perfect in Dallas. I usually would rather draft our running backs due to their situations rather than our wide receivers. I think wide receiver talent wins out in the end. So if I had to rank these guys from a redraft perspective, I rank Tolbert before Wandale. I rank him before David Bell. Probably even rank him before someone like Johan Dotson, maybe even a Christian Watson. But at the end of the day, from a dynasty perspective, I think the long-term talent is going to win out with those other wide receivers. Now, let's move down to our next tier. Tier 8 here is going to be Damien Pierce at 18. And with Damien Pierce, I know on paper he looks like he's going to be the Houston Texans starting running back, but I got a couple questions. A, does it matter if he's the starter? Because, I mean, even if he's the starter, what is the workload going to look like with the running back 2, with the running back 3? Will this be a committee where the starting running back's only seeing 50% of the touches in the backfield? B, even if he does command a 3-down workload, is he going to be a player startable in fantasy? Going back to what we were discussing earlier, wide receiver, I don't give a damn what your athletic profile is. I mean, give me David Bell at a discount because people think he's slow any day of the week. But at running back, that athletic profile does correlate with fantasy football success. I've proven that, guys, over a large sample since 2014. He's not a great athlete. He stayed all 4 years at Florida. He was never given a full down workload. And on top of this, he fell to day 3 in the NFL draft. So even if Damien Pierce were to go out there and be the starting running back for Houston, I think he's a low-end running back 2, high-end running back 3 in fantasy, where I'm not that excited about starting him on a contending roster. And at the same time, he has no team investment, where you could easily see him having a good rookie season, and then the NFL doing what they do every single time with these running backs with no team investment, where they just go through and draft a running back in next year's draft class. But now let's look into our next running back 19, Isaiah Spiller. This is someone that before the NFL Combine, before we knew that he was slow and undersized, hell, I had him up there with Breece Hall. I mean, I got to admit that, because you had NFL mock drafters mock drafting Isaiah Spiller as the running back 1 in the NFL draft, and he is a good pass catcher out of Texas A&M. But him being undersized, him being slow, immediately had us tell you that he was dead in fantasy football. He ends up falling to day 3, but lands in a great spot where, hell, Austin Eckler is not going to be seeing every touch out of this backfield. Not only is Austin Eckler not going to see every touch out of this backfield, but if he were to go down, Isaiah Spiller can catch passes. Isaiah Spiller can be a poor man's Austin Eckler and one of the best offenses in football. So I think it's a sneaky good spot for Spiller. Now, our next player at 20 is going to be Trey McBride. With McBride, tight end 1 in this class, yes, going to be playing behind Zach Ertz at the beginning of the year. Yes, probably going to be playing behind Zach Ertz at the end of the season as well. But we know Zach Ertz is on his way out. Clearly, Trey McBride, the future of the position. And also, if we just project a year out with this Arizona Cardinals team, DeAndre Hopkins is going to be another year older next year. And if they also phase out Zach Ertz, there'll be targets available in one of the fastest offenses in the NFL in terms of pace of play, as well as an offense that's one of the most pass-happy offenses in the NFL with an efficient Kyler Murray at quarterback. So I do like the situation for Trey McBride long-term. You do have to know you draft Trey McBride here. You're not going to be able to start him year 1. And then our 21st player, Malik Willis. With Malik Willis, we announced him dead the second that you had the NFL draft. Remember, I had Malik Willis as our Dynasty quarterback 1 going into the NFL draft because, hell, he was projected to be a first-round NFL pick. And we were looking at the rushing ceiling and we said, oh, okay, well, it's very similar to Jalen Hurts. If he starts for an NFL team, he'll be a starter in fantasy. We can't say that for the other quarterbacks in this draft class. He falls to day 3. I think it's unlikely that he is the starter in Tennessee at any point outside of a Ryan Tannehill injury. But back in 2020, this is where we were drafting Jalen Hurts. I ended up coming away with a ton of late second, early third round Jalen Hurts in 12-team Superflex leagues. I'm going to be drafting Malik Willis in the same exact range. It's a long shot, but if he does start, he's going to be startable in fantasy. Now, our last tier we are going to be looking at will be led off with Tyler Algiere. And with Tyler Algiere, very similar to what we have with Damien Pierce. If he does start, does it even matter? Realistically speaking, he's going to be playing on a bottom 5 offense. He's a day 3 draft pick. Even if he were to have a good rookie season, we could see the Atlanta Falcons just go out there and replace him with the running back in the 2023 class. So with these guys, it's very difficult to evaluate them because I think they have cap ceilings. And not only do they have cap ceilings, but even if they're good, they can be replaced. So it's hard to know, do you want them on a rebuilding team? Do you want them on a contending team? Kind of stuck in no man's land for me. I'm very rarely ever targeting these guys. And then our next player, Romeo Dubose, off the board, 23. I know he's everybody's favorite guy. I know everybody wants to bet that he's going before Christian Watson this time next year. I like the profile. It's not nearly as nice as Christian Watson's. And I also think that the Green Bay Packers could invest into wide receiver next offseason. I think Watson's significantly more likely to be the wide receiver 1 on this team. And then our last player inside this top 24 is going to be Brian Robinson. With Brian Robinson, he is someone that is in an interesting situation in that it's in the range of outcomes for him to start over Antonio Gibson. If Gibson comes out and it continues to fumble the football, all of a sudden the coaching staff is probably going to want to get Brian Robinson more and more involved. But even if that were to happen, you're going to be in a situation where J.D. McKissic's still the passing down running back. So you're getting a first and second down grinder that still probably going to have to split some work with Antonio Gibson. And is definitely not going to be getting the usage on third downs where that is going to be going to J.D. McKissic. So he finds himself in an interesting spot. I'm completely fine taking him at the end of the second round, though, because he is a running back that is kind of like a poor man's David Montgomery. I would say that's the perfect comp for him. Poor man's David Montgomery can do a little bit of everything, not necessarily great at anything, but of course, David Montgomery is better than him. That's all I got for you, though. These were our top 24. Let me know if you would like us to go a little bit deeper than this. Let me know how much you hate my ranking of Romeo Dubose, how he should be significantly higher, yada, yada, yada. I know I can hear you in the comment section right now. But thank you, guys. I truly do appreciate you. I hope that we get to see you out in a live stream sometime soon, drafting with us over there on Underdog. And make sure, if you aren't drafting on Underdog yet, you go fix your life. Go sign up for Underdog Fantasy. Use promo code FLOCK with $10 deposit. You'll get our 2022 rankings, our 2022 fantasy football draft guide. But thanks again, guys. I appreciate you, and I'll see you tomorrow.